Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about top 10 3 drops. That's right, we got some 3 drops. They're going to be the best ones. It's going to be the best ones you have seen. These ones are going to be sweet. So it's another in the line of, lists, videos. I guess people could say these kind of things are clickbaity. I mean, are they? I wouldn't consider it clickbait. I don't know. Who doesn't like lists? I love lists. Lists are great. I list everything. Anyways, so I wanna we're going in order. We went from 1 to 2, and now we're on 3. Now, like I said, probably go to 6. I think. But after that, the pickings are pretty slim. Sometimes I don't even know like some of the higher rarities. Isn't there only one card at 13? Was that the new Emrakul? The second Emrakul? Wasn't that a 13 mana one? I can't remember, but yeah, 16 would be pretty lonely. It'd just be Draco, but Draco was good. Erratic Explosion, Draco, I mean, right? That's pretty good. Um, so yeah, let's get into this stuff. Let's get started. All right, so I mean there is a pile of honorable mentions. Um, yeah, so let's just let's just start with some of the stuff. First off, Hypnotic Spectre. Both it and Phyrexian Negator, also honorable mentions, are mostly a function of Dark Ritual's power. Obviously, Turn 1 Writ Hippie is really strong. Like, it'd be strong in any set because of, or excuse me, any format, just due to how well it can just sort of snowball. Um, Especially like you can hit like lands and stuff like that. And then like if you sinkhole them or follow up with a Hymn to Turok, like just totally silly. So yeah, Hypnotic Spectre, pretty insane. Not pretty much. I don't think it's ever seen play without Dark Ritual off the top of my head. Maybe in old school, but in old school you can play it with Dark Ritual anyways. So I mean, its power is probably like good in old school, but I'm not super familiar with the format. But yeah, it's obviously again a function of how good is Dark Ritual, its ability to basically force them to have an answer on turn 1. Otherwise, like I said, snowballs out of control and they just lose the game. It generates like 3, 4, 5 plus card advantage or disadvantage for them, however you'd like to feel like it. And of course, the art is amazing. I mean, got that old school Douglas Schuler art. I mean, it's incredible. The Samuel Taylor Coleridge flavor text. I mean, God, it's amazing. I mean, this card is probably one of the best black cards ever, at least from a flavor standpoint. It's amazing. Phyrexian Negator, another big one. Although this guy I saw play not just because of Dark Ritual. For a long time, combo decks would just like, especially in Vintage, they'd jam a lot of negators in their sideboard and just be like, like land Mox Gator, and you're off to the races. So it's not just Dark Ritual, but any sort of ramp is obviously good with the Gator. A little bit easier to cast because it's got the black and 2 colorless mana cost, and obviously it's a 4-turn clock against control decks, which back in the day were typically creature light or creature less. So Negator could very easily go the distance and have more or less no drawback. So it's very good in that. Again, both of Hypnotic Spectre and Phyrexian Negator are or were very powerful in the Suicide Black decks or Butter Knife decks in Vintage a long time ago, about 2001-ish. Wow, that makes me feel old. I can't even remember the last time I said Butter Knives. Butter Knives was the slower version of Suicide Black. It played like Nether Voids. I think maybe, God, did it play like Mishra's Factory 2? It was a much slower version, more aimed on disrupting them. Um, I was pretty sweet. Man, that was a really sweet. I love mono black decks. I like really good monocolor decks for some reason. I don't know why. I tend to like those more than multicolor decks. I couldn't tell you why. I don't know. I just maybe just like everything looking the same. Like, oh, it's all black cards and swamps or something like that. That kind of looks good to me. Okay. Um, but yeah. These cards obviously not quite so good. Didn't age so well. Obviously, a lot of their power, again, like I said for the millionth time, was predicated on Dark Ritual being legal. Without it, they're quite a bit worse. Obviously, Negator's kind of unplayable in a lot of matchups. Whereas Hippie Spec is just a little too weak, a little too slow. Um, but yeah, very very powerful, very strong cards. Definitely caused a lot of headaches first, like few years. These cards were legal, so yeah, it's okay. Probably about early 2000s ish. Right. I mean, honestly, kind of. This is sort of unrelated, I guess, but like right around Mirrodin, when Mirrodin first came out, with like like Chalice of the Void and all that other stuff, with the new card face and everything. That was literally when things really began to change. Because obviously the set before that was Onslaught, which had fetch lands, which changed the way that mana bases were constructed and pretty much the rules of really in any format with dual lands. The rules were totally tables and upended. So that was pretty crazy. Um, yeah, that was right around Mirrored and everything changed and all these decks that were basically supposed to be good just ended up stopped being good. But that's kind of a different conversation. So let's go to the next one. Ball Lightning. Ball Lightning, of course, is um, well, it's Ball Lightning. It was good in Sly back in the day. It was about as mana efficient as you can get. 3 mana for 6/1. Not really used to it because 3 mana is kind of a lot. So some of the red decks are pretty slim on their mana base, so they don't really have enough to really consistently hit. 3 mana for Ball Lightning. It's a little slow, a little dirty, vulnerable to removal. Could be tempoed out. If it gets hit by a plow, Fatal Push, Hydro Blast, any of those kind of things. But it's really powerful back in the day, real good. Kitchen Finks. This card is really really good. Oh man, it was so close to making the list. Probably the closest one out of any of the cards on here. Saw a ton of play everywhere. Obviously, even of course, Commander has all the counter shenanigans, so it's great in sacrifice decks, part of infinite combos. I mean, if a couple other cards I thought of after I had Kitchen Finks on the list, and I had just had to move him off because like the other cards were just I think just better or more ubiquitous or whatnot. Leovold again, really good. Uh, Good enough that it's banned in Commander. Um, Pretty good in Legacy and Vintage, but the problem is 3 colors, so it's only good in like those 3 color decks. But pretty strong, pretty strong. Can't even remove them without getting a card pop. So Geist really strong, but yeah, just kind of fragile. It's hard to swing in. It's good, powerful card, powerful card. 3 mana for 6 damage every turn. Pretty strong. Can't go wrong there. Of course, War Chief. War Chief kind of standing in for Goblin Matron as well as Jim Palm Incinerator as well. Again, very very powerful cards. But unlike say like Recruiter or Lackey, uh, it's not it's not like obviously like super broken. Like it's a good fair card. Um, Whereas something like Lackey is probably just not going to be reprinted in any format. And Something like Recruiter is, I mean, still banned in Legacy, so there's very little chance that anything remotely similar will ever be banned or be printed. Uh, but yeah, very very good, very very powerful. I don't think War Chief is so good, so strong, that maybe if there were like worse cards on the list, I could see it, but um, it's just not strong enough, I think, and certainly not ubiquitous enough, to really see enough play. But yeah, very, very good, of course. I don't think anyone's gonna poo-poo that guy. Then we got Tireless Tracker. This card, has just seen tons of play in modern, like in the rock decks, or I guess black, green, Golgari, mid range, or whatever the fuck they want to call it. It's just the naming conventions of these people are just retarded. Anyways, Tireless Tracker really good. Sees play a ton in Legacy in the lands deck and the sideboard. Another excellent angle of attack, card draw, and a big beater. I mean, he gets real big with, like an exploration play and stuff all over the place. Or, fetch land, stuff like that. Just goes nuts. Yeah, he's really strong. But yeah, there's tons and tons of cards. I think I pretty much hit. God, I think I pretty much hit every really strong 3-mana card. So if it's not here, it's actually probably on the list. And if I forgot anything, you guys be sure to tell me in the comments. I'd probably feel like a dummy if I forgot anything because I spent like a week or two thinking about this. So I'm like, if I forgot anything, I'm a dummy. But anyways, let's get to it. Okay, so first off, we got number 10, which is Metalworker. And this one was a late addition to the list. And this guy was actually banned in Legacy for quite a while. But they unbanned it, quite a few years ago, if my memory serves. And yeah, I mean, it's produces a shitload of mana. I mean, a shitload of mana. I mean, a shitload. So this card is sweet, really strong with things like Voltaic Key, really good there. Obviously, good with artifacts. I guess that's kind of obvious. Um, yeah, I mean, this card is responsible for some pretty silly openings. There's a lot of like really powerful high mana cost artifacts. Things like Sundering Titan, or even just like dropping like Chalice of the Void and Trinisphere. Um, all sorts of good stuff. So yeah, obviously it has synergy with stuff um, like I said, Voltaic Key, again, really good with Memory Jar, although that's kind of not legal in most formats. Jar Metalworker, it's just like, oh, you can tap it for a bunch and then refill your hand after you play it, and then untap it with Voltaic Key, and then tap it again to play all the stuff you drew with the jar. This card is sweet. You definitely even warp your deck around it, playing things like Darksteel Citadel or any of the other artifact lands just to pump Metalworker. So yeah, I mean, this card is pretty silly. This one was obviously more chosen just because of how powerful it is. It's only sees play in like one deck, basically the Mud style decks, and those aren't even like the best big mana decks. But yeah, this card is absurd. Like, just on its face, it's just so strong. I couldn't leave it off the list. It knocked some stuff off. So yeah, we got to go with Metalworker. This card is pretty silly. Pretty silly. Uh, yeah, nothing like dropping like double Wormcoil Engine off this thing. Like, I mean, there's just the amount of mana and the stuff you can do. Combos with, oh shoot, Staff of Domination, right? In Commander, or I guess you can do it in Legacy too with like Kuldotha Forge Master to tutor up your staff or something. But yeah, got synergy with that. I mean, this card's pretty sweet. I'll drink to that, and I like Metalworker. Mm-hmm. Good stuff, but not much to say about here. This guy's pretty obvious how he works. Mud decks are pretty simple, so yeah, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so we got 9 to the Reliquary. I think I should say probably first off, the first top 5, I'm not really sure where they should go. The latter 5 are just so strong, I think, that it's a lot easier. But 9 to Reliquary, good card. This card is great and like any sort of zoo style decks or Maverick style stuff, or just any Bant style thing. I mean, basically any green white deck that has good stuff to search up. You can get Pendlehaven or Wasteland or Caracas, or you can search up the Dark Depths combo with Thespian Stage. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can get. Sky's the limit. Of course, it's a huge body, which is really nice. You can get oh shoot, the land from Zendikar where it comes into play and then gives a creature protection from a color. God, what was that? I can't remember. Bajuka Bog, of course, that's a big one. So, I mean, you can do anything with this chick. I think it's chick, right? Looks like a girl. Yeah, super strong, really good in those style decks. So not only is it's kind of just like a big old beater, but it's also really sweet at uh, obviously being a toolbox tutor engine. So aggro loam, of course, likes this card quite a bit. Um, yeah, obviously, I mean, stuff like Mox Diamond, like turn 2, Knight of the Reliquary, that's pretty good, right? So, yeah, this card is sweet. Has done a lot of work in like standard, modern, and standard, modern, legacy. Pretty sweet, like it a lot. Really strong card. Yeah, combination of being able to tutor and just be able to beat the shit out of someone with this thing. Really nice. So even like the deck building constraints I think is kind of interesting. Like, oh, how many planes do I need, or how many, or I should say, how many forests and planes do I need to make this card work, right? So even that's kind of a little bit interesting, even though it's mostly a non-factor. But yeah, sweet card, super interesting, really skill testing. Boy, and even does tricks with Maze of It. Oh my gosh, this card does it all. So number 9 is Knight of the Reliquary. What a cutie. Okay, so number 8 is a Stinkweed Imp, and many people probably say this is like doesn't really count as a 3-drop. I've casted Stinkweed Imp more than a number of times to like probably around the number of times I've hard casted Force of Will. Uh, so like this thing is actually pretty solid because A, it has flying, and it is good for jumping, um, because well obviously it's good for grinding out and kill stuff whenever it's blocked or blocks. So that's pretty sweet. So yeah, more than a couple times I've casted a Stinkweed Imp, so it's not like it actually has a converted mana cost and actually does stuff when it's cast, so that's pretty sweet there. Obviously, its main role is to help facilitate the dredge engine with Golgari Grave Troll, primarily in Legacy. Oh, I mean, clearly also Vintage as well as Modern, although Modern doesn't have Golgari Grave Troll. So this guy is really strong. And of course, when the first deck first appeared, the Frigorid deck in Old Extended, of course, Stinkweed was there as well. Yeah, definitely. God, what a weird ass deck that was. I mean, well, it became Dredge, but yeah, it was. I remember reading about it. I'm like, what the fuck is this thing? All over the place, dude. All over the place. Oh well. But yeah, this card is good. So it does act like you do actually even cast it, but it's got 3 converted mana costs, and that's the thing what we're really concerned about. I don't care if you want to curve out with stuff, because like curving out with some of these cards isn't even what you want to do half the time, right? Like sometimes you just want to jam them late game, and then they're so strong you can just run away with the game or whatever. So I don't really care, about that too much. But yeah, this card is sweet. Facilitates the extremely polarizing dredge deck. Some people love it, some people hate it, and people who love it tend to be the ones with the bizarre Bagdads, and they're like, "Wow, this is sweet, good stuff." Or in Legacy, of course, you got Cephalid Coliseum and Breakthrough and Careful Study, and then of course Faithless Looting primarily. Um, Man's Card Suite does a lot of really good stuff. So when it's not dredging or being cast as a blocker or an anemic clock, it does remove to Icarid, which is really nice, of course. So it makes more fodder for Icarid, which is good. You need a certain number of black creatures to sort of support that, especially if you need to grind out the game. So Stinkweed Imp is perfect for any part of the game where you're trying to just grind. Really good. Second best dredger in the dredge deck. Look at that art. Even the new art's kind of good, but I like the original weird art. The Edward P. Beard Jr. art. Look at that thing. Oh man, what a nasty imp. Alright, so Sneak Tips number 8. What's number 7? Yeah, that's right. This fucking chick. This card was miserable. Like this is probably one of the original cards where Wizards was like, wow, maybe this repeated tutoring thing is not all it's cracked up to be. I mean, not only just is it like a repeated tutor, right? Because it has the ability to like pay 3 mana of any color, don't even have to tap it, um, and you can put a rebel on the bottom of your library to tutor it out again. So even if they deal with it, you can still tutor it up again. This card was ridiculous, especially under the old Legend rules, where like the first person to land Lin Civi was the one basically locked their opponent out, so their opponent couldn't cast a Lin Civi. I mean, yikes! This thing caused all sorts of horrible like issues with the game, like sort of Sensei's divining top sort of issues, where just like just the other person couldn't play, made the game take a long time. I mean, it's just a silly card. Um, yeah, so obviously, it was a excellent card to tutor up with like Ramosian Sergeant. I think Ramosian Sergeant got 3 or less. So you put this into play, and then you just get any friggin' rebel card you wanted, put it directly into play. Um, it was excellent in like the counter rebels decks, or just the regular rebels decks. Did I mention it was banded block? It was banded block. This is a stupid card. It was just absurd, and so it was good in all sorts of different decks. I think it was played and extended, although I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. Very, very good in standard, obviously good enough in block. This thing was just silly. So yeah, card advantage all over the place, especially in slower formats, so we just be able to grind people to dust. And of course, under the old Legend rules, made games pretty horrific in the mirror match, where if you won the coin flip and you got your Civi out first, I mean that's it. That's all she wrote, right? So yeah, not too fun. Well, I mean, it is pretty fun. I like tutoring out whip quarters. That's a sweet card, although that wasn't available in decks at the time. But yeah, Lin Civi obviously very very powerful. Stopped playing a lot of different decks. In pre-modern, of course, you can play her in counter rebels. That's pretty good. Although I don't not a huge fan of the deck because again, just a bit too slow, but it grinds really well. So if you're looking for like kind of an aggro control, interesting sort of almost fairies-esque archetype, because it operates on instant speed with a lot of flash stuff. Lin Civi's your girl, and she's my girl too. She's pretty strong, pretty cool. Love that arcade post art. So what's number 6? Yep, yep, yep. So you guys are probably thinking, wow, Flicker Wisp, really? Yeah, really. This card is sweet. This card does everything. It does so many tricks. This card's so strong, like your opponent doesn't even know what you can do with it. It's crazy. So it's a 3 mana, 3/1 flyer, which is great. So that's fine, like on average. And of course it does the blinky shenanigans. Um, and so this card is excellent at holding equipment and beating down, swinging through all sorts of potential blockers, that kind of thing. But the tricks you can do with this thing and something like Death and Taxes is totally silly, totally silly. And that's kind of why I put it up here so high, because it's so good and sort of like disruptive white aggro decks like in Modern or Legacy. Um, you just This card is silly. I think it was like very recently I saw a video by Pleasant Kenobi, and he was doing a Death and Taxes video, and he was like, oh, like he was uh, showing like all the cards in the deck, and then he's playing a match or whatever, and there was a part in the game where he was like had this line with like double flicker wisp and aether vial and like blinking flicker wisps and stuff, and it was just like it totally blew my mind. It was like, holy crap, like there's always like new interesting lines whenever I play like Death and Taxes. It's like the deck is so so sweet, so interesting. I like all these like kind of like crazy, like sort of toolboxy, like interactive, like synergy, wonky decks. And Flicker Wisp is so good in that, and it just blew my mind. And he ended up winning that match, of course, because it's just like this weird, like there was like a null rod in play that was shutting off his Aether Vial, if I recall correctly. Then he like blinked out like his Flicker Wisp, and then when that Flicker Wisp came back, it blinked out the null rod, and then it turned on his vial again, and then yeah, it was just totally crazy. It was like wow, and he was even describing a situation like that in like his when he was talking about the deck. I was like, oh, that's crazy. I wonder when that comes up, And then he's like describes like this blink shenanigan thing he does like 10 minutes later, and it's like wow, this is so sweet. Yeah, so I love Flicker Wisp. It has weird art. Um, I mean, it does crazy, sneaky, tricksy things, which I love. I mean, this card is just wow, just powerful. I mean, shit's all over Merit Lage. One of the reasons you're so good against that deck. I mean, just does everything, deals with everything. I mean, this card is sweet. It's certainly not more powerful, maybe even not more ubiquitous, but it's pretty important. One of the cards that's always been like 4-0 in Death and Taxes, has always been good, um, and just does all sorts of sweet stuff. So it stood the test of time ever since the deck was created. Flicker Wisp was in there, does weird stuff. It's an elemental. Who knows what the fuck's going on in this art? Alright, that's good. Let's get on to number 5. I wonder if you guys can figure out the top 5. Maybe you can. It's pretty good. So let's get to it. Yeah, so this one I originally had this at like number 10. The more I thought about it, the more I thought about it, the more I thought about it, I was like just kept moving it up and up and up. Yeah, this card is pretty good. Pretty good. This is definitely a card that's much better the older you go, the bigger the format, just because of the number of cards you can play with it, the cards that enable it, more free spells, things like that. So this card is obviously pretty. I think it saw a little play in standard at the time. I don't quite remember off the top of my head because I wasn't playing a lot during then, but it's definitely a ton of legacy play. And the card, of course, uh, you know, is restricted in Vintage. One of the few restricted creatures. I think just it and Lodestone Golem. Although basically, because like it's so strong, it barely acts like a creature half the time. You just play a bunch of spells with it in play, and then you get a bunch of other dudes, and they all have prowess too. So it's like even if you remove it, like they still got a ton of value out of it. So it's not really vulnerable to like the same kind of like removal and stuff that creatures would tend to be, like Lodestone Golem, which prevents them from playing any removal at all, for that matter. But yeah, this card is sweet. In Legacy, it sees tons of play in the Miracles deck, and I think that's the primary place where you see it in Legacy. And Miracles plays a ton of cantrips, and Monastery Mentor I think is probably the card that really got Sensei's Divining Top restricted, because you can just chain 2 tops with this guy in play, and just spam the battlefield with dudes like just totally silly. This card is pretty bonkers with just a bunch of cantrips and crap. So like the cards that are quote unquote air, like your cantrips, like Brainstorm or Ponder or whatever, are just silly with this guy in play because it increases your board presence. So, and this thing is awesome. It gives Miracles a way to end the game very quickly, very efficiently, even when it's digging for other stupid junk. Um, and yeah, this thing is awesome. Obviously, like the art's sweet. I love the monk stuff. I love the kung fu stuff. I mean, that is hella cool. I like the prowess keyword. I like that the monks it makes also have prowess because he's teaching them how to be a monk mentor, I guess. I don't know. It's just awesome. Obviously, and it's even better in Vintage because you have Moxes as additional free spells, stuff like Misstep to protect it from Plow or Bolt. And then Misstep, of course, creates even more dudes. I mean, pretty ridiculous. Did I mention Gush? You could play Gush with Jesus. Like, this card is nuts. It's definitely pretty absurd. Whereas like this is like a young pyromancer on crack, where like young pyromancer I don't think was like one of the better 2 drops. This is definitely one of the better 3 drops. Man, the thing is ridiculous for sure. So yeah, there's definitely a card that's only going to get better in the future. Very, very good in the older formats. So let's go to number 4. Okay, you're probably thinking Eternal Witness, what the fuck? Like, but remember what I said was a lot of these things are also determined by how good these cards are in other formats. So Commander, again, probably the most popular format in the game, probably more popular than Standard, I think, maybe, but definitely first 1 or 2, and I mean, it's hard to, sort of calculate these things because it's not like Commander's an official format, but it's basically the closest thing we can really get to kitchen table Magic. And Eternal Witness is, in case you haven't checked, well, I checked just the other day, the last couple of years on EDH RAC, it is the top played creature in the format. And it is, I think it's a top played creature. I think it's ahead of Sakura Tribe Elder. And it is the 14th most played card in Commander. So like the only things ahead of it are things like Counterspell, the Swords to Plowshares, Soul Ring at number 1, of course. Like a bunch of the Signets, some Mana Ramp, like Cultivate and things like that, which are again oftentimes played alongside Eternal Witness. This card is totally great there. And then of course, in older formats, in old extended, you ever play this card with like Cabal Therapy. Have you ever like been Therapy, Witness, Therapy, then Sack Witness to Therapy? I mean, you just get absurd lines of play. Like this card is so good with Cabal Therapy, and even something like Duress. It's so good at regrowthing all sorts of things. You can do all sorts of tricks with it. I remember seeing people do tricks with Crystal Shard in Standard when that was a thing. Um, and obviously that you can still do stuff with Crystal Shard with Eternal Witness in Commander, which is awesome. I mean, this card is so good to blink or reanimate or steal from your opponents, and like with bribery and stuff. I mean, it just does everything. This card is so sweet. Like, compare it to something like Regrowth, which is technically quote unquote stronger, but it's less abusable, especially when unless you have really strong things to regrowth, like say, Black Lotus or Ancestral Recall, things like that. Time Walk. Um, Eternal Witness is just going to be better because there's so many things you can do with it. This card is great with Skull Clamp. When that came out, I mean, you could just do there's tons and tons of stuff, so much synergy, so much good stuff. I mean, this card is sweet. Think about Recurring Nightmare on this card. Like, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's awesome. It is so awesome. It's one of the cards I actually miss most in pre-modern. Um, Being able to play that in the Rock would be really fun. Oh man, I love Eat Witness, and it's even a win condition. You can beat down with it eventually at some point. Good with Full Wrath Stronghold. I mean, on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Like this is the one of the few green cards like it and Cultivate that I'm always jamming into my Commander decks. I love Eternal Witness. This chick is hot, and she's on the new Astral Drift because you can blink her out, right? Because that was the old Astral Slide. The green-white slide deck Julian Ugiten won with when he was like 14. I think it was Worlds in 2004, and is the green-white slide deck. That was amazing. Oh my gosh, just sliding stuff out, getting Witness back, getting your Cyclone lands back. I mean, just awesome. This card is pure fucking value. Probably one of my favorite green cards ever. I mean, oh my god. Think about getting Plow Under back with this. Just amazing. Pure misery for your opponent. I'm loving it though. I'm Mick fucking loving it. I'm trying to make a McDonald's joke. Anyways, fuck that. Whatever. Let's go to number 3. Yes, that's right. We have a Murloc for number 3. One of my friends mentioned this like a day or so ago, or a little while ago. I can't remember. Recently-ish. Mentioned how True Name Nemesis looked like a Murloc, and I can't unsee it now. Oh, God. This thing's about as annoying as a fucking Murloc. Jesus Christ, look at this piece of shit. Oh, fuck. God, fuck this card. I mean, this card is stupid, right? Like, this card is really dumb. I don't understand why this was even printed. This is not an interest. I mean, who's gonna play 3-mana 3/1 in fucking Commander? And yet they print this fucking thing. I mean, it's so dumb. Like, why does this card even exist? Like, I don't want it banned, but I would not cry if it left the format because it's just so stupid in Legacy. Like, it does create like a lot of non-games, especially with equipment. I mean, you can still remove it like after board. There's all sorts of things. You can red blast it on the way down. When it's being cast, of course. Uh, Toxic Deluge, Zealous Persecution. Some decks can kind of ignore it. Like obviously Goblins has something like Pile Driver, so multiple Pile Driver spam with a bunch of other dudes. You can, swarm around it a little bit. But yeah, this card's pretty dumb. It's definitely warps the game around it. It's really hard to get rid of most of the time through most means. I mean, it's really not fun. I mean, it's pretty derpy. I mean, it's basically Gristlebrand levels of retarded. I'd say, just not fun. And the worst thing is, like, this card it's really polarizing because it's so garbage in the combo matchups. Like, it just doesn't matter. Like, what does this do against Merit Lage? Or what does this do against like a Tendrils with 10 Storm, right? Like nothing. So it's just really bad. But it is obviously very good in like I guess Merfolk plays it. That's not really a deck though. And then Blue White Stoneblade plays it, of course. Plays a couple copies of it. Yeah, this thing even pitches the Force of Will when it's garbage. So yeah, really powerful card. Really polarizing matchups. Really warps the game around it. I mean, just absurdly powerful. Obviously, this thing would see an unbelievable amount of play in Standard and Modern, like 4 copies all the time, all day long. But obviously, thank God they just printed this in a fucking Commander set. I mean, they're not dumb enough to think that this card wouldn't be good in like these kind of formats, in Standard or Modern or whatever. And thank God I mean, this card is probably even less likely than Force of Will or Wasteland to make it into Modern Horizons because it's just a stupid card. It doesn't fix anything. It only makes the format worse, like net negative, But there's obviously in Legacy, there's enough answers to it where it's not terrible. Miracles can like hit it with a Terminus or just go around it with, of course, Monastery Mentor. That guy's pretty good. I think we talked about him a little bit. So, but yeah, there's only 2 other cards better than this guy. We got another 3/1 coming up. Ooh, what could that be? Ooh, real tough. Yep, that's right, Vendilion Click. Why is this card in over True Name Nemesis? First off, it's pedigree. Look at this card. This thing's fucking awesome. Even its new art, fucking awesome. 3 fairies, fucking awesome. This thing is amazing. Fuels all sorts of fairy tribal synergies. I love fairies. Fairies are great. Fairies was another obnoxious blue-black overpowered deck in Standard, which I'm a big fan of. No spoilers. So yeah, Fairies was amazing in Standard. Saw a lot of play in Extended and Modern. Saw this obviously Click itself saw a lot of play in Legacy and of course Vintage 2. I think I've seen Click in decks. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure Click was in some decks, but yeah, this thing has seen play everywhere. It's basically good in every single matchup. I mean, look at how many multiples of Clicks are played, even though it is a legendary. It's very much like Thalia, where it's just like, it's so good, you run multiples anyways, even if they're quote-unquote dead. So yeah, this card is strong, strong, strong. So not only in just like the fair matchups where like you get to see with their hand, take out their best card or whatever. It's a 3 mana flash evasive flyer, so you can just jam the thing on the end of turn and still keep counter magic up. Unlike something like TNN, True Name Nemesis, where you have to jam it during your main phase, and of course it's only good against decks that want to play with dorks. So yeah, this thing is awesome. It's great. It's an evasive threat. It's got flash. It's got a pseudo duress effect, which is typically not something that blue ever gets. This is really powerful. Oftentimes these play in the main deck or sideboard of blue decks, especially control decks, because you need another clock, and it adds another um, uh, to be able to be able to disrupt them on another axis, with the duress effect basically. And it's just so powerful. This card has seen tons and tons of play in tons and tons of formats. I don't see this. This isn't the kind of card that will ever get bad. I don't believe. I mean, you'd have to have something really power creeped to really make Vendilion Click like unplayable, compared to it. So this card is awesome. Tribal synergies out the ass. I mean, so it will only get better, really. Think about all the tribal stuff. Think about if modern ends up slowing down quite a bit, uh, due to either bannings or just, Modern Horizons, where just force negation maybe fixes everything. London Mulligan makes it easier to mold your ley lines, so maybe some of these linear decks are just not as good. Everything slows down a lot. Control becomes dominant. What do you think is good against control? Fairies. Absolutely, just crushes them. Think about fucking turn 2 Bitter Blossom, fucking spamming Spell Stutter sprites. I mean, it's basically a blue-black version of goblins, right? Like, I mean, this thing's amazing. All your creatures are great. They pump each other. They do a lot of stuff. They're all really sneaky and tricky and have flash. Um, and I mean, this is probably one of the best fairies cards. Although I love Spell Stutter. I'm not gonna talk bad about Spell Stutter. I love Spell Stutter. Um, God, I mean, what more can you say about this card? This card is absolute A plus plus. The thing is amazing. I love Vendilion Click so much better than True Name. You're just wrong. You're just wrong if you think True Name is better than Vendilion Click. It's not even close. Like, just being able to hold up counter magic, being good in all matchups. Maybe not as good in the fair matchups as True Name is, but it's always good. You don't have dead cards in your deck. It flies, it duresses, it gives you more information, it disrupts them. I mean, amazing. Amazing. But there's, if you can believe it, there's actually one card, I think, that's better than this. One 3 mana card better than Vendilion Click. Well, what could I think? What could I be talking about? That's right, bitch. It's fucking Dr. Teeth. Yeah, you're probably thinking, what the fuck? If we're talking, like I said, over all formats of all time, like historical dominance, I mean, nothing even comes close to Psychotog. I actually don't even think we'll ever get a creature that was this dominating ever again. Because this card was basically scaled off of all of the crazy insane like card advantage and super efficient cheap removal and all sorts of disruption like that. Um, and I guess even stuff like upheaval too. Like, this card is just totally nuts. So this dominated, absolutely fucking dominated, like standard. Like, if you remember back in the day, they're like, oh man, they printed Chainer's Edict. This will definitely kill Psychotog. And then what ended up happening? Like, Psychotog just adopted Chainer's Edict. And it ended up killing shit because the decks that ran it, say like Mono Black, just got shit on like with an upheaval. Like, they couldn't keep up. It was just absurd. The amount of like card selection, card advantage in the Tog decks was nuts. I mean, absolutely open and shut case. Probably one of the most dominating standard decks of all time. Not even close. Okay, so we go Kotogu Extended. Again, same freaking thing. As long as it was available in Extended, this was a deck, this was a thing, and it was strong. And I mean strong. Really, really good. Legacy, I don't think it was played very much in the older format in Legacy. Like, not off the top of my head, I don't remember it. I remember there being a bunch of different decks, but I mean, Hulk Smash was a deck in Legacy. I don't remember it dominating, but I remember it being very good, of course. And lastly, we get to Vintage, where this thing just went fucking nuclear. Like, okay, so we have dual lands, check. Fast Bond, check. Gush, check. Bunch of tutors, Vamp, Demonic, all that bullshit. Merchant Scroll, oh yeah, that's a pretty good one, huh? Check. I mean, and then just like Berserk, that was a card. Even restricted, you only really needed one anyways, and with the unrestricted, you played like one main deck and one sideboard to wish for. I mean, just like this, absolutely insane. So you had two different versions of Tog decks basically. You had Hulk Smash, which is basically just the combo control version, a little bit slower, had a better mana base than Growatog, but very, very strong. Strong deck, a little bit more resilient. Then, of course, you had Growatog, which was like blue, black, red, green, I think, half the time. So you could play like stuff like Rack and Ruin against like the workshop decks, and it was literally one of the few decks that could legitimately be called an aggro combo control deck. Like literally all three main sort of archetypes, because it could play aggro with like Quirion Dryad. It could play control because obviously a ton of card draw and disruption, and then it could combo you out obviously with Psychotog and Berserk. Like the amount of card manipulation and the way this card Psychotog scales with these kind of things. Think of like Gush, giving it, was it plus like 5.5? So you draw two, return two, and then you have half a point of, or no, 4.5 I think. Draw two, return two lands, and then card in your graveyard, the Gush. So yeah, like plus 4.5, and then just totally just goes nuts. So you could be able to kill people all over the place. And of course, you have fucking Time Walk. Like, how insane is Time Walk in this deck? This deck was very similar in the way to some of the Monastery Mentor decks in Vintage played very recently. So yeah, it was totally nuts. This is probably one of my favorite decks ever was Growatog. Or Hulk Smash was good too. Um, and it just absolutely obscene power level. Like Brainstorm, Merchant Scroll. I don't think Gush isn't restricted at the moment. I don't think it was for a while, and then on and off, on and off. Um, like a lot of these cards that were really good in this deck are now totally restricted. I mean, obviously the deck doesn't see, or Psychotog doesn't see any play anymore in Vintage, as far as I know. It's been quite a while. But yeah, I mean, just just obscene, totally obscene. This card is one. There was a joke like back when I was playing where like this card would actually be worse. It's like a 3 mana 5/6. Like literally, it's better. It's worse if it's better, quote unquote, because obviously you can't one shot someone with it. This thing is just. It is. We probably won't ever see a card like this again, and this card probably won't be as good ever again because they just don't really print really, really strong draw effects. Now, this might be, if they did reprint this in Modern and Counterspell's there too, I mean, it would probably be pretty good there. But other than that, this card really is reliant upon like there being really strong card draws, things like Deep Analysis, and of course the aforementioned Factor Fiction. Needs good disruption, so like Duress, Counterspell, things like that. Mana Leak, Circular Logic, of course, very, very good. Things like Upheaval were pretty important because some decks are like, well, we'll just go super, super grindy, and those decks just get wrecked by Upheaval. They can't beat it. Absolutely unbeatable. So you have inevitability too. So this deck was hard to beat. This deck was hard to beat. It was totally insane. I mean, and it was so fun to play. Just being able to play a Tog and then just kill someone next turn was just, that's sweet. And we'll probably never see anything like this again because they have a better handle on the power of creatures. They have a little bit of a better handle on things that are like really synergistic. So all the graveyard stuff, like when Odyssey was coming out, um, we're not gonna really see super overpowered stuff like that again. So probably not gonna see anything like that. So Tog will probably more or less be reign supreme as probably the best creature ever. Although Death Ray Shaman's pretty good, but he was just like obviously he didn't do shit in fucking standard. So I'd say Tog is just better overall. I mean, and like Tog was just more impactful, better in a lot of ways than Deathrite, whereas Deathrite didn't really make decks like all the decks that like Deathrite was, in or still exist. He was just a really, really good enabler for those decks, whereas Tog is like kind of irreplaceable. So it just sort of tied everything together. I mean, look at this guy. And the art is so iconic, so ridiculous, so sweet. Like, look at this smiling bastard. Like, what is he? Is he like thinking about how he's gonna chomp on someone's balls? Like, don't chomp on my balls, Psychotog. That's not very nice. Yeah, this card is kind of absurd. Probably the most dominating, powerful creature ever. Although I guess maybe you could say Goyf is kind of close, pretty close, but Goyf just didn't really. Goyf wasn't quite like Tog. So, yeah. I mean, shoot. What else can you say? This thing was awesome. You play with Intuition and AK. That was good. Draw 3 cards, draw 4 cards. Man, just it did everything. It did everything. It was a moat. It killed them. It was a madness enabler with you can discard your deep analysis, of course, to draw cards. You can discard your circular logic, of course, to pay the madness for that. I mean, it did everything. It was so fun, and that deck was super cheap. Like all the cards in it, outside of like the like Underground River or something, were like just commons and uncommons. Man, those were the days, right? Oh, everything about this deck was awesome. A plus. I mean, nothing. I mean, nothing I've seen can even come close to the dominance, the power of this card. Really sweet. I love Psychotog. Great, great stuff. So that's it. That's it for today, guys. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any other ideas, like what did I forget something? Pretty sure I didn't. If you have other ideas of where cards should be on the list, I mean, tell me. Tell me. That'd be sweet. So thanks for stopping by, and have a great day.